everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad Gustafson and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Right now.
Right now.
I heard you call and I had to open the door. I'm with you now.
I love it. I love it. So how you doing, my friend? You've been reading a lot this week?
I'm amazing. I've been reading lots and I've been saving this book. I read it a little while ago, but I wanted to make sure it was out and available for everyone. And I have good news and weird news. How's that for a teaser? The good news is this is one of my all-time favorite books from the whole school year. School year, like from the year 2021. The weird news is you and I have a really cool thing coming up next week. We're gonna do a little bit of a teaser next week.
I'm doing my drum roll here.
There we go. Nice.
Okay.
A best of kind of a look back at the year, and I'm not putting this book I'm going to talk about in just a second into that, but you just got to trust me, it is good and it should be in any best of list, but it just is released, so maybe next year it'll be in the best of, right?
Maybe, right.
Yeah. Should I just dive? That was kind of a weird intro. Should I just
well, now with that kind of intro, I'm dying to see what the book is, so let's hear it.
I am telling you, Jen, so this is like a thriller, might be a strong word, but to me it was a thriller because I was nervous and reading it was kind of a mystery thing. I was a second grade teacher. I'm an elementary principal. So mysteries to me, it's like Encyclopedia Brown and Cam Jensen. And I love those books. I grew up on those.
Absolutely.
Yep. Mm-hmm. However, I'm coming to realize, like, holy cow, there's a whole nother level of mysteries out there that, like, the book I'm going to share, I would recommend maybe to high school or 10th graders or something, but maybe that's being a little conservative. Who knows? But I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. This book was written so well that the author is gifted at having me feel like I'm in the moment, guessing, like, oh my gosh, who can I trust? Oh my gosh, like I was questioning everyone so masterfully. So the story, the main character, it's a young woman, a high schooler named Cass Adams, and she was kidnapped, like right at the beginning of the story, but that's not quite exactly the whole main story. That's just trauma from her past that then paints and impacts everything. Mm-hmm. She actually got away from the kidnapping somehow, and I'm not giving anything away. She got out of the trunk of this car, but here's one of the reasons why she's just haunted by this thing and struggles to move on and heal. In the places where she should be safest and free from the drama and the memory and feeling safer, like school for one, she'll come across these bright pink envelopes from her kidnapper, and and it's addressed to the one that got away, right? And they stay in communication, and for whatever reason, Cass won't report these pink I forget why, but she won't tell anyone she's getting these. So she's inwardly just dying and tormented and finding these, Jen, in the worst places, like in her home, in her room, which is freaky. So then as a reader, I'm like, how did that happen? Because I'm analyzing the characters that have been introduced and like, okay, wait, at school, it's got to be a staff member or maybe a friend. You're just going through the list of a parent or things like that. Anyway, I want to show that I'm going to show the book cover. The book is Out of the Fire, and it's on my bookshelf, not at school. So I got to do something unconventional here.
That's okay. There you go. I got it.
Can you see that? So you see the pink envelope by Andrea Contos, Out of the Fire, and it's kind of a hat tip or homage to those pink envelopes that she's getting. And the plot is even deeper and thicker and more riveting, because Cass gets together with a group of friends at school who all have unique pasts and trauma that they're like going to put a stake in the ground and say, enough, we're done. We're going to take matters into our own hands unlawfully in some cases. And they just are empowered together and do some things like that are, getting retribution and illegal. But so that's happening, and then you don't know how to feel as a reader. Like, should I be cheering for Cass? Should I be like, oh my gosh, why is she? And her friends doing that. And then you start to wonder, because this, the pink envelope person, her kidnapper, then starts sending her like pictures of this group of young women who are getting retribution. Like they
Wow.
were at a campfire out in the field, and this person so then clearly took a picture and was stalking and nearby. Like all these things are happening, and for all of those reasons and so many more, you've got to read this one right now. It just came out in December. I was going to book talk it a little while ago, but I think the release date got bumped due to, I'm not
Sure.
really sure why, just the world
Tell
that we
me
live
the
in.
title and author again.
Yeah, it's Out of the Fire by Andrea Contos.
Yes.
And I'm just telling you, I'm new to more of the young adult
Yeah.
mysteries. Like I said, I'm used to the second grade mysteries, but this opened my eyes, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I was just glued to this book, Jen.
This year has felt like such a good year for those YA mysteries. Like I'm thinking about The Project by Courtney Summers that I read at the very beginning of the year, Fade Away by E.B. Vickers, Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boleyn. Or I hope I get that last name correct. But all four of them, and then this one sounds like it's right on this list. These sort of like edge of your seat, spine tingling mysteries that really make you worried for the characters because the characters are in peril, right? Like,
yes, and I was trying to figure out as I'm reading kind of the natural thing, like who should I trust? What should I be thinking? And I found myself not knowing, like, oh my gosh, I'm reading into everything, like hyper analyzing what's happening just out of fear. Like, is it that person? Like, oh no, I do not want Cass to call that person or whatever, go in that person's car. But I was thinking to myself, the author, Andrea, perfectly captured probably what it feels like in that situation for Cass, not to, to show up in life and not to know who she can trust because of the situation. So.
I'll say one other thing about mysteries. I think sometimes, like historically, mysteries are sort of like seen of as like maybe like Pulp Fiction is like sort of popular fiction, maybe not very highbrow literature or whatever. But I think the authors who come up with these mysteries, especially the ones that really surprise you, they keep you guessing. I mean, the skill of those authors is really astounding to me. I couldn't do it. I don't think I could do it.
I completely agree with you, and I don't care the highbrow thing. Like this was a good book, but the art or the ability to engage me on all these different levels, just from interest, motivation, like fear, advocating for Cass, all these things, the roller coaster, just to have that authentic reaction and connection. It was really a special, I'm going to call it an experience.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Yay. Well, that sounds like really a great book. I'm going to have to add that one to my list.
Yeah, definite read this now. And one of my favorites from the year. So I'm excited to hear, what do you got for us this week, Jen?
Well, my book is very different from yours, but we're on similar paths in that we waited to share them. Partially, I waited. This one came out maybe a month ago now, but I felt like I wanted to read it several times. It's a picture book, but it was one of those picture books. And I know you've had this experience where I felt like I had to sit with it a little bit longer and think about it a little more deeply before I was really ready to share it. You know what I mean? I didn't want to give it just like a surface level, this is a cool book, you should read it kind of thing. I want to sit with it a little bit. So I'll go ahead and share the title. First of all, it is the companion picture book that goes along with the 1619 project, Born on the Water. And it's by Nikole Hannah-Jones and Renée Watson. Of course, Renée Watson is one of my favorite all-time authors. I would read her grocery list if she published it. And then it's illustrated by Nikkolas Smith. And I don't know what I was expecting of the book, like the 1619 project's gotten a lot of publicity, and I don't know what I was expecting, but it was unexpected to me in that I think I connected with the central character of the book in a way that was just really meaningful. So the book, it really tells the story of this young girl who goes to school and is given an assignment she's an elementary school age kid, given an assignment to create a flag that represents her ancestral land, like to represent who she is, where she comes from, right? And she's sitting there as the teacher gives this assignment, and she watches as her classmates start creating, they have some ideas, they know kind of where their, family came from and stuff. And they're making their flag. And as she sits there and looks at her white paper, she starts to feel ashamed. And when she goes home, her grandmother asked her, how was school today? And she says, I got this assignment and I realized that I don't know where our family comes from. I don't know what my ancestral land is. And it made me feel ashamed. Like there was something wrong with her. Like she somehow wasn't good enough. She didn't have this context that her classmates, it seemed to be very easy for her to do. So her grandmother says, well, then what I need, her grandmother begins to explain that the reason why she and so many other Black kids wouldn't be able to complete that assignment easily is because so many of their ancestors were enslaved. And by being enslaved, not only were they taken from those ancestral lands, but along with that freedom, they were also, what was taken from them was the stories that we pass down to each other about where we come from. Enslaved people and enslaved families were often separated from each other. So kids, enslaved children, didn't often grow up with their parents. So the stories of where we actually came from got lost in a lot of that journey, right? But the grandmother knows about the history of slavery and the rich and vibrant culture that these African nations had prior to the slave ships showing up to take them away from that. And she tells the story of what African culture was like and the inventions that these people created and the religions that they celebrated, and the ceremonies that they celebrated, what their culture was like to fill in these gaps for this girl, right? But then from there also, what I found really profound was that she began to say that, our history isn't only about enslavement. This country here, whether we're talking about the infrastructure, the roads that we drive to like get from point A to point B, the music that we listen to, the United States was in large parts, both literally and figuratively, built on the backs of enslaved people. So we have a lot to celebrate in terms of what this country is. We helped to make it, right? And the grandmother, in telling this history to her granddaughter, empowers and replaces that shame with a sense of pride, right? It's written all in verse, and the different sections are these poems that are beautifully written, and the illustrations that go along with it are really powerful too. And I wanted to share one with you, if that's okay. At this point, the grandmother is talking about those slave ships and what life was like on the slave ship for these people who suddenly found themselves with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people they maybe didn't even know, bound at the bottom of these slave ships, going to a place they didn't know where they were going, but realizing eventually that they were never going home. Like that moment that they must have come to on the bows of those ships when they recognized that they're never going back, like they're never going back to their home. And the poem goes, some could not bear the pain. They refused to eat. They shut their mouths until their hearts gave out. Others tossed themselves into the teal eternity of the Atlantic Ocean, swimming one last time with their ancestors. Sickness and hunger, filth and cruelty took the others, almost half. But those who did not die resolved to live no matter what. Packed in dark misery, strangers chained together, head to feet, hip to hip, in the bottom of a ship called the White Lion, they saw that these strangers, men, women, children, kidnapped too from many villages, these were their people now. These many people became one people, a new people. And that is why the people say, we were born on the water. We come from the people who refused to die. And the illustration for this scene, you can see it's like this beautiful watercolor. It sort of gives the impression of someone diving into the water while not being, like graphic. And then it spreads over to the next scene where you just sort of see the bowels of this ship. And Nikkolas Smith, who did the illustrations, I had the pleasure of hearing him speak, and Nikole Hannah-Jones at NCTE not that long ago. He talked about the research that he did to ensure that every aspect of the representation of these African people was accurate. So you see, like, this face paint that was here, he researched all of that to ensure that it looked like what it might really have looked like at that time. But we go through this journey of the assignment at school, and Brad, I have to tell you, like, it made me think deeply about my own practice as a teacher. And sometimes the questions maybe that we ask kids to think about innocently, like make a flag of your ancestry, etc., without maybe really considering how that could bring up trauma or emptiness for some kids who, because of how this world has played out, there might be some gaps in that understanding, or filling in those gaps might cause them to have to look deeply at some painful parts of our country's history. But it wraps up in a really beautiful and empowering way. You can see the final spread. You have like our country in the background, and powerful Black people there emerging from the water to show their strength. And it was one of those books, Brad, I'll say this last thing, and the last poem I just want to point out, here she is, it's titled Pride. So she goes from shame to pride. And it was one of those books that perfectly exemplifies to me why in the archive for Read This Now, we always say that picture books, instead of just labeling them as picture books, we put that their grade level is all. They're not just for elementary school learners. They're not just for kids yet who maybe haven't mastered a certain amount of language and need to be read to. Picture books are for all learners. And I felt like this was a wonderful entry point into some really important conversations for young learners and older learners like myself, because I felt like I really learned and got a lot from this book. So it's Born on the Water. It's the companion picture book to the 1619 Project, and it's by Nikole Hannah-Jones, Renée Watson, and Nikkolas Smith. And I think you should read it right now.
Really powerful, Jen. I don't know if metamorphosis is the right word, but the contrast between the beginning, the cover, and then that last spread you shared. Wow, was that powerful?
It really, really is. I don't know, like Brad, I have only been immersed in the world of picture books for maybe the last 15 to 20 years. But I think about books for young people when I was growing up. I certainly didn't have the kind of eye or understanding to look at those books in the same way I do now. But I just feel like the depth and breadth of publishing for young people right now is the richest and most powerful that it has ever been. There's still work to be done. We still need more representation, but wow, books like this are incredible. And we're lucky to be living in a time when they're being published. So it's good stuff.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate everything. So tune in next week as Jen and I share the best of from the year. And if you want to try to be guessing what we might pick, you could, of course, check out the website, the archives at bit.ly/read_this_now. Did I say that right? I think
you did. That was the most epically professional transition. I was so impressed.
And then I botched it. I couldn't handle how good it was going. I just had to self-sabotage.
Oh I love it. Thank you, my friend, and happy reading, everyone.